In this chapter, public managers need to have an understanding of the constitutional context in which they must, and I repeat, must operate. Now, keep in mind, this is not only the federal U.S. Constitution. For many of us who work in state and local government, the basic framework still applies. In fact, for many regulations and situations in which you might act daily, you will be bound by the constitutional context and laws of both the federal and state governments in which you are under. Add to that county and city ordinances and resolutions, and you begin to see how your managing ability depends on your knowledge of how these all work together and separate. For example, dealing with regulations regarding cannabis differs from local government to local government, and the state law is in violation with federal law. So what prevails? We will get more into those details later, but now let's look at the federal constitutional framework. First, separation of powers. The Constitution clearly requires government authority to reside in all three branches of government. No one branch has unrestricted authority or power under the Constitution. However, it grants great power and authority in the Congress through legislation to establish, empower, structure, staff all federal agencies. Additionally, they have great oversight powers to call hearings, change laws, and increase or decrease budgets. Now, the president, on the other hand, in the view of some political scientists, is merely like a babe in the woods when it comes to authority under the Constitution in relation to Congress. Now, although the president has constitutional powers to faithfully execute the laws of the land, when it comes to budgeting and many other aspects of moving government agencies, his or her power is restrained. Now, make no mistake, the president has great informal power and formal power in many areas such as executive orders, power to nominate appointees, as well as staff directly in support of these many policy-level positions, a number which now is approximately 8,000. So perhaps the most authority the president has is in foreign affairs. But the president can also lead on all policies and has powerful resources such as the Office of Management and Budget. But as you will see, the president must rely on Congress and the judiciary to govern successfully. Now, the judiciary is empowered to review actions of government, the president, Congress, and governmental agencies. And they get the final say if a law was followed. With the rise of the administrative state, the courts have carved out, over the last 30 years or so, the ability of individuals to have standing to sue agencies that have not protected their constitutional rights. Moreover, public administrators can, in some instances, be held personally liable for harm caused to citizens if they are proven to have grossly neglected their authority and violated constitutional rights and processes. The courts have called this putting administrative bureaucracy in the harness of procedural due process. For example, if your rights are violated by a police officer, the question will be, did the managers provide appropriate training for the police? And also recall the Flint, Michigan water pipeline project that poisoned the water supply with lead. The state and local officials involved in that fiasco are currently on trial. Or what if you wrongly revoke someone's business license? Can you be liable? These are the important issues that you must be aware of and that are explored in this chapter. Another aspect is federalism. Federalism is the division of power between the individual states and the federal government. States have rights to regulate almost everything in the domestic sphere. However, the balance began to shift after the Civil War with the 14th Amendment, expanding individual rights, and the 16th Amendment following a federal income tax, which allowed a federal income tax. Now, important constitutional clauses also impact federal authority, and those include the Necessary and Proper Clause, which gives power to Congress to make laws in certain areas, or the Spending Clause authorizing Congress to collect taxes, the Supremacy Clause regarding the supremacy of federal over state governments when dual responsibility exists, and of course, the Due Process Clauses embedded in both the 5th and 14th Amendments. Yet, it's the Commerce Clause which has changed the face of federalism significantly. Basically, it gives Congress the right to legislate interstate commerce, dealing with anything having to do with safe and fair manufacturing, working conditions, transportation, etc. Now, combining this power with the power of equal protection under the 14th Amendment, and the federal government then has now evolved a wide-ranging ability to regulate all aspects of state activity. Now, the 11th Amendment protects state sovereign immunity by preventing lawsuits against them in federal courts. However, exceptions include areas where individual constitutional rights are violated. For example, Section 1983 of Title 42, based on the 14th Amendment, will allow for lawsuits against state and local governments, for example, if excessive use is used by law enforcement agencies without proper training, or if local managers have deliberately been indifferent to the constitutional rights of individuals. This specifically looks at your actions as a public manager. Now, the 11th Amendment protects states' sovereign immunity by preventing lawsuits against them in federal courts. However, exceptions include areas such as where individual constitutional rights are violated. For example, Section 1983 of Title 42, based on the 14th Amendment, will allow for lawsuits against state and local governments, for example, if excessive force is used by law enforcement without proper training, or if local managers have been deliberately indifferent to the constitutional rights of individuals. This specifically looks at your actions as a public manager. So these are the concepts that we were talking about as we begin this chapter. We'll finalize this chapter in the next module, but if you have any questions or have follow-up questions on this material, please feel free to give me a call. Thank you.